Hi friends, this is Dr. Richard Ruling here to welcome you to the Total Health Channel. Please like and share this with others that you know on your mailing lists, etc. I believe this is critically important. The topic is how SDA leadership opposition to Ellen White leaves the church or Adventists unprepared and unready for Christ's coming as a thief this springtime. And we're going to start with Acts 7, verse 52. When Stephen was being stoned, he asked, which of the prophets were not persecuted by your fathers? And this is a statement about all prophets being persecuted by the people of their day in presenting present truth. Ellen White suggests that in the book Great Controversy, page 143, when she says, opposition is the lot of all whom God employs to present truth specially applicable to their time. There was a present truth in the days of Luther. There's a present truth now. I would suggest that the present truth requires faith to see the good news in it. Noah had the good news, the gospel. It just it seemed crazy that there would be rain because it had never rained. But the good news was a boat. Well, today, the land of the promised land that God covenanted to give to Abraham for his seed is shaped like a speedboat and on the map. And I think that before we get done, hope you see some information that may be of interest to you. Want to start back in the beginning. I'm saying seven mistakes that the leadership have had in opposition to Ellen White. First of all, in 1888, there was a message which many people do know and about. The 1888 message, which Ellen White says was righteousness by faith. But really, that's just a nice term. Righteousness is all that we do, and there's more included in that than most Adventists are getting. We see from, for example, Christ's statement in Matthew 17, verse 11, that before he comes, Elijah must come and restore all things. And Elijah comes in Malachi 4, verse 4 and 5, in the context of the statutes and judgments. Behold, I send you Elijah. Well, those statutes and judgments have a sevenfold emphasis in Ezekiel 20, where they're linked to sabbaths. Statutes, judgments, sabbaths, statutes, judgments, sabbaths. I'm seeing the sevenfold emphasis as a mark of end-time truth, just like Revelation has 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 thunders, and so on. We need to understand the sevens. The Jews couldn't count the sevens and 70 weeks, really, in Daniel 9, and they missed their Messiah. And then they did another bad turn, couldn't count the sevens when God said, if you walk contrary, I'll punish you 7 times over. Well, they walked contrary for 390 years in Ezekiel 4, verse 4 and 5. And basically, if you multiply the 390 years times 7 is 2,730. They were not free to return when the UN gave them land, but they returned anyway. Those Jews in Israel today don't have any interest, I'm told this by Messianic rabbis, in their spiritual heritage. They're just there for the free land. And 8% of the Jews are Orthodox. They hate Christians, would spit on Christ. So, it doesn't leave but maybe 2%. Well, I know there are missionaries over there, and maybe they're doing better, but still, a lot of people are going to be in trouble when God allows Muslims to take the city. In Zechariah 14, last chapter, nations will be gathered against Jerusalem, houses rifled, women ravished, half the city is going to go into captivity. This doesn't sound like God worked miracles for Jews to get back there when their time was not up yet. They were still in exile, but the time period from when Sennacherib took Jews in Israel captive in 722 BC from 2730 was 2008, but no year 0, 2009. And in that year, Pope Benedict goes Rome. Rome was assigned to flee Jerusalem and the city. So God, even to the very year, was trying to protect his people who would honor what Yeshua said, Christ said. Okay. And so bottom line, not free to return then. Well, we deviated a little bit to see that there's a big picture coming, and I want to suggest to you that you want to get my book, Megaquake 2023, which when they take the city of Jerusalem and they celebrate their mosque, which says Allah has no son, the Lord will roar from Jerusalem, the heavens and earth will shake, and they will flee. But that earthquake initiates the end time period of judgment. Ellen White refers to it as court week, a week of years, yes. And are we really ready for that? And are we ready for the earthquake, which is going to put Loma Linda on the ground? We'll get to that in a minute. But basically, we've been talking about how the church turned against Jones and Waggoner and the message of righteousness by faith and the statutes that were part of that enforce the annual feast days so that we will know when those things come. Ellen White says the whole Jewish economy is full of instruction. It's the divine appointments were designed to teach the people that at the time appointed, one would come to whom the ceremony pointed. And if we're going to be ready for those ceremonies or times, just as God afflicted Egypt with judgment, he took Israel to a covenant, later said, I'm married to you. He regarded the covenant as a marriage. It's not about a quick snatch to heaven and eat wedding cake in heaven, okay? It is a similar event to the Exodus. In fact, Paul twice uses the Exodus as an illustration. He said, this is 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1, Brethren, I would not have you ignorant how our fathers all passed through the sea, Exodus. And in verse 11 it says, all those things happened for examples written for us at the end of the world. So, yeah, get it, okay? He again repeats that in 1 Thessalonians 5, 1-3, when he said, speaking of the day of the Lord, he said, I would not have you ignorant how, he said, of the times, you recall back that in Acts 1, 6, and 7, disciples wanted to know when Christ was going to restore the kingdom to Israel. And he said, it's not for you to know the times and seasons. Why? They'd failed him already. They had their chance. But in 1 Thessalonians 5:1, Paul says, of the times and seasons, same phrase, you have no need that I write, for you know them perfectly. Well, I think we should. And the next two verses say, for the day of the Lord, which is an extension of night of the Lord in Egypt. God executed judgment on Egypt, and he called it the night of the Lord in Exodus 12, verse 42. As day follows night, the end time period of judgment will be the day of the Lord, just as Exodus was the night of the Lord. And it says that it comes as a thief. God came as a thief to Egypt. Nobody saw God. He was invisible. He came at night. He took their slaves. Yes, he came as a thief, took their slaves. And when they say peace and safety, Pharaoh was saying that as he urged his chariots into the Red Sea, but sudden destruction. Okay, on us as well, on America, we are worse than Egypt. Okay, Egypt enslaved Israel, but America has enslaved most people in alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and medical care is a form of bondage. Okay, not good, but Adventists think it's great. Okay, we call it Adventist health on the big hospitals. Adventist health. I've seen it in Los Angeles and Loma Linda. Adventist health care. Well, not health care at all. Okay, or very little. Okay, because medical care has nothing to do with health. It's inversely related. The more you take medical care, the worse your health is going to be. Adverse drug reactions are a leading cause of illness and death. Bottom line is that Ellen White did not want drugs taught in her school. Okay, it was to be her school. She saw it in vision, sent $5,000 for the deposit. It arrived on the day due when church leaders were meeting wondering what to do. They had not $1 for deposit when her check by the postman was laid on the table with a check for $5,000. And she wanted it for natural remedies. She did not want pharmacology taught. Church leaders thought it might be smart to get an AMA accreditation and teach pharmacology. She said we're not to be so much tied by the educational system of the world by a thread. But they did it anyway, okay? And took her school, and now in a crisis of health care around the world, Adventists have nothing to say. We could have, should have, would have, if we had done what she had in mind with natural remedy emphasis. But teaching pharmacology, we somehow think and lie to ourselves that drugs are different now. Well, they aren't the same pure poisons they were in her day. They are modified poisons. While I was teaching health at Loma Linda, the dean, Dr. Mervyn Harding, came to me. He had been chairman of the pharmacology department, shared with me an interesting statement by Drill's textbook of pharmacology that drug action always represents artificial interference with the natural functioning of the organism. Pharmacology and toxicology are one. Every drug, it says, by definition, is a poison. Pharmacology and toxicology are one, and the art of medicine is to use these poisons beneficially. Well, think about that. If your blood pressure is sky high and you're about to blow a blood vessel and have a stroke, yeah, take a drug and get it down. But there are about a half a dozen things you can do in what you eat and drink and smoke and so on that will raise your blood pressure. Alcohol makes your blood sticky, so you need more pressure. Salt also helps you absorb more poison, so your pressure is higher. High fat, greasy diet also makes your blood sticky, more pressure. Okay, caffeine raises your blood pressure. A lack of sleep, if we get more sleep, blood pressure comes down. A warm tub bath can relax the blood vessels, etc. The natural remedies that Ellen White talked about, basically. Health care is healthy habits. Has nothing to do with drugs. I was board certified internal medicine. I passed those boards, did not like them, and did not like the practice of medicine, basically. It's symptomatic, but when you take a chemical to relieve your symptoms, you may feel good for a while, but sooner or later you're toxic to what that chemical is doing, and you'll have other problems. And the medical textbook, physician's desk reference, about 3,600 pages, fine print, adverse drug reactions, carcinogenesis, contraindications, pregnancy warnings, all of those for a way of practicing and getting money from people and surgery, so that we now have millions invested in the stock market from our medical institutions, and even our church gets a billion in tithe. A portion of that goes into the stock market too. But we are using God's money in a bad way, and I'd say, hey, help independent ministries who are trying to do the best they can to give the gospel. But I'm telling you, I've got a gospel that exceeds most of them, okay? Because it's not the same old gospel that I mentioned earlier. Noah had the gospel. Abraham had the gospel, good news, land, real estate. Moses had gospel, freedom from bondage, and going to the promised land. Christ had even better gospel. In my Father's house are many mansions, and spiritual victory in our lives. But our gospel is better still, because it's all of them. As the days of Noah, there's going to be some likeness to the days of Noah. And real estate that Abraham had for his seed, Paul says, if you're Christ, you're Abraham's seed. It's end time stuff for us, okay? And we can have a message like Moses to draw people out of Babylon, like Moses drew people out of Egypt. If we're going to sing the song of Moses and the Lamb, it's got to be similar in some sense to what Moses did. Otherwise, we won't sing a song of Moses, a song of our experience that nobody else can learn. But if we learn it and have that experience, we can travel with Christ wherever he goes in eternity. High reward, better than any other entrepreneurial $1 million, $1 billion deal you can get. If you just invest your time with them, they're going to show you how to make it and lose it before the year's over. So I'll just tell you, big stuff is coming, and let me tell you how and why, basically. I've mentioned an exodus because America is like Egypt. Pioneers came to Egypt in a time of famine, just like Israel went to Egypt in a time of famine. We remember how Joseph went first and prepared 7 good years. He stored the grain, and his brothers and Israel, Jacob's name was changed to Israel, went down with a family of 70 to Israel for the famine, the remaining years. But our pioneers came here in a time of famine for the Word of God because the papacy had banned the Bible, burned people at the stake, heretics, for not bowing to the Pope, etc. Yes, and the Pope today calls the Bible a dangerous book. Dangerous to his system because it unmasks his hypocrisy and the fact that Lord God, the Pope, is not at all the case. Okay, one of his official titles, and he has usurped God's name and title. Actually, Catholic translators yanked God's name right out of the Ten Commandments 7 times as a mark of end-time truth, and Ellen White saw that in the end time, God's people will exalt his name as God goes through the land and desolates it with fire, basically the plagues and troubles, and then says his people will exalt his name. So yeah, the name will be important as part of our covenant with Christ. Okay, he says, "I'm come in my Father's name," etc. Well, more on that later, but the point is that we're coming to important times, and when God executed judgment on Egypt, he took Israel to a covenant, a marriage that he regarded as marriage. He said, "Return to me, I'm married to you," in Jeremiah 3:14, and they became his kingdom as well as a result of that covenant in Exodus 19, verse 5 and 6. We can make a covenant. In fact, God is not going to speak out of heaven. He wants us to initiate the covenant. He wants us proactive, just like Israel at the Jordan River, ready to enter the Promised Land, was proactive. God did not part the river until they walked in. They had to go for it. And I believe we can go for it if we got faith and believe his word. And if we don't believe his word, we're going to wait and see. That is the par excellence of no faith. Prove it to me. Well, lots of people think in their mind, I'll believe it when I see it. Well, God says, if you believe it, you will see it. We got to believe it first and go for it, and he will do it for us. Confident of that. And we're going to see it this springtime. I'm confident of that as well. Why? Because when God did that with Egypt, it was a Jubilee event. He freed the slaves. That's what happens in the Jubilee in Leviticus 25th chapter, verse 10. And land was restored to them. They were given the promised land on that Jubilee event, and they went for it. But the point is, the Jubilee later came every 50 years, and 50 years from Roe v. Wade that enables the murder of babies is this year, 2023 from 1973. Judgment is due this year, okay? And if we had time, I could show you how every 7 years from Roe v. Wade has been a significant event. I just might take the time right now to do that. 7 years from 1973 was 1980. Dark day that repeated on the anniversary date of May 19, 1780. New Englanders had a dark day, okay? Even had to use lamps at noontime to read a newspaper. But Mount St. Helens erupted the day before, and winds carried the ash into 3 states in the northwest, just like the original dark day was in the northeast. And so anniversary date, do we get it? Okay. 7 years later, the 4 events in 1987. Persian Gulf crisis, okay? Part of an end-time crisis as well for us, as we will see. Stock market crashed 500 points. That was big, huge for 1987. Earthquake in Whittier, California. Populated area, not just out in the middle of a desert somewhere. And the Pope landed in Miami, kissed the ground in an act of claiming it for Catholicism. And he went around our country like the Roman army went around Jerusalem. All of 4 signs in 1987. 7 years later, nearly 1 million Protestants were slaughtered by their Catholic neighbors in Rwanda. As Bill Clinton got reports daily and did nothing, as the UN did nothing at all, even though they had a full presence in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. Did nothing in deference to the Pope, who said probably let the local government handle it. Local government was Catholic, and bad slaughter. I don't want to be part of a UN New World Order when they're going to be doing what the Pope wants them to do. That's his road to supremacy, with so many Catholic nations voting his agenda. Okay, it's going to be trouble, bad news. If you think, well, I'll take my chances, I'm going to live in the country and so on, look out. Christ says in a preamble to his wedding parables, "Fear not, little flock, it's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell what you have." We laugh at the rich young ruler who did not do that when Christ told him, "Oh, all these things I've done from my youth up." Well, me too, pretty much, but I'm not going to trust all of that to getting to heaven. And sell what you have. I did that 20-some years ago, about over 25 years ago. I had 20 acres on Lookout Mountain, half-hour south of Chattanooga, and I had trees planted. The juice would run down your arm when you ate a plum that dropped off the tree the night before, or the peaches. Really good stuff. But I sold it in obedience to Christ, and my spiritual life has been blessed. I've never been homeless in the sense of needing to sleep on the street or subways or something like that. You can rent if you sell your place. You don't have to own. And Christ came empty to this land. Do we think we're going to do better than him? I hope not. Okay, we need to follow his example, and in the end time it's going to be that way, in my opinion. Okay, so sell what you have and be ready. In fact, let me just suggest Ellen White's duty in view of the time of trouble in early writings, page 56, 57, how we are to make a covenant with God by sacrifice. Put it on the altar and let God consume it, if he would. If it doesn't sell, that's all right, you can keep it, but do it anyway. Put it on the altar for sale, and God can do it if he will. So, bottom line, we've talked about a lot of things. I failed to mention how the leaders went against Ellen White when they sent her to Australia to get rid of her. She returned in 1901 to appeal for reorganization. They voted it but never did it. And in 1903 they voted a more hierarchical system, opposite direction from what Ellen White wanted, like the Catholic Church has. 5 levels: priest, bishop, archbishop, cardinal, and pope. And Adventists have pastors, presidents of conferences, presidents of unions, presidents of divisions, and general conference pope. Well, not good. Her response was, "How has the faithful city become a harlot? My Father's house is made a house of merchandise, a place whence the divine presence and glory have departed," gone. And a following year, the church was considering incorporating. She said, we cannot enter into any new organization. That would be apostasy from the truth. But they did it anyway, and that's what we've got today, a General Conference Corporation from 1904. Okay, if it's going to be she said in Special Testimony, Series B, number 7, the great apostasy which is developing and increasing will continue till the Lord descends from heaven with a shout. Well, do you want to be in something that's in apostasy till he comes? I hope not. At some point we got to leave, and I would just want to suggest to you when that might be. Okay, it's when he comes to knock for Laodicea. Okay, the ancient church of Laodicea was lukewarm, kept Christ out, just like modern General Conference and Christians today. Western Christianity is lukewarm, and Christ is deferred. We don't really do all that he said. We just want to live comfortably in lukewarm water, I guess. But the messengers to that church, agelos is the Greek word in Revelation 3, it says to the angel of the church. Well, the angels are not wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. The messengers are. Angels are messengers, but the preachers and leaders of the church are the messengers who are blind and naked. Okay, and blind means can't see what's coming. Naked means going to be thrown out in the wedding parable of Matthew 22, verse 13, really, for no wedding garment. It would only, in a wedding, the host provided the wedding garments in Bible times, and it would have only taken 2 or 3 minutes to change clothes, put the wedding garment on. So short delay is fatal if we aren't watching for him. we are supposed to be ready, watching in Luke 12:36, that when he comes and knocks, we open immediately. Well, immediately is shown by the rule of first use in Matthew 4th chapter. When Christ called James and John, they immediately left the ship and their father and followed him. And that's what we should be, so ready. Ready to leave close family ties, like the father, or the ship, our livelihood. Are we really willing to do that? Okay. We should be watching. In Luke 12:37 it says, "Blessed are those servants whom his Lord, when he comes, finds watching. He will gird himself and make them sit down to eat and serve them." That's what he did on the eve of Passover. Okay. The timing, in fact, that Luke's wedding parable has triple Passover clues. Watching is only done on Passover, only commanded at Passover. Only night in the year they are to be awake at night. Okay. Jews were to eat the Passover lamb and leave nothing till morning. Christ asked his disciples, "Watch with me. Couldn't you not watch 1 hour?" Well, we need to learn how to do that. I've learned how myself. I fall asleep if I try to pray like the disciples. But if you read the closing scenes of Christ's life, like in Desire of Ages, you can read a chapter like the Last Supper and pray. Read a chapter like Gethsemane and pray. Read a chapter about Pilate's judgment hall, or Annas and Caiaphas, the different judgments that Christ went through, and pray between chapters. You can stay awake at least till midnight, and I believe that's when judgment's coming, as in Egypt. Okay. But there's an important modification for this that you need to get in my book. If you get the, hold on. It's this book again, Megaquake 2023, and three timelines and 7 events signaling apocalyptic times this year. Okay, and if the last book of that, the last page of that book is about this book, the earthquake and the 7 seals. We want to be sealed, and I believe the covenant we need to make is linked to 7s, and there are 7 seals in Revelation 6th chapter, and they link to topics that have a 7-fold emphasis. They are the wedding feast, okay, that we consider for 7 days. Like, you have to think of spiritual, okay. In the wedding parable of Matthew 22, the king sends his servants and bids people to the wedding, but the remnant scorn it, and and treat the messengers badly until their city burns. Okay, and I see that the wedding feast really is a spiritual event at Passover, not about cake, steak, and milkshake, but really about topics. Christ said, "Beware the leaven of the Pharisees," meaning their doctrines, in Matthew 16, verse 12. So we need to get ready and understand those topics before it comes, or we might not be prepared. God is not trying to push something on us. He just wants us to understand what we haven't understood from the 1888 message to the present time. And so thank you for giving it a consideration and look. Please, I could tell you more about how our leaders have failed us. Just basically, Neil Wilson, when Reagan wanted to appoint ambassador to the papacy, the Vatican, said nothing. Well, bad situation. We quit being Protestants at that time because it has involved millions of dollars for the Vatican ambassador, and Reagan opened the southern border. Reagan approved Rex 84, which is FEMA camps for illegal aliens. Today, the illegal aliens are fine with Rome land security. We want them coming in. They want a big problem, and the answer will be New World Order, the Pope, of course. So get ready for that. It's coming, but Sunday is not next. First angel comes before third angel. We need to see a time of judgment impending, and it's coming this spring. Basically, I've given you the 50 years from Roe v. Wade is execution of judgment this year. I'm going to give you one more. Joel 1, verses 3, 4, and 15. The day of the Lord comes in the context of 4 generations. It says, "You tell your children, let them tell their children, and them another generation." 4 generations. A generation is 40 years in Hebrews 3, 9, and 10. 4 times 40, 160. Adventism formed in 1863. God's arithmetic is right on. It's 160 years from 1863 is 2023, when it will be over for us. I'm saying that seriously, and I would not want to be a church leader who has been mum without speaking out. I believe we've got to. Ellen White appealed for this in the Seal of God chapter of Volume 5 Testimonies, page 211. Here we see the church, the Lord's sanctuary, was the first to feel the stroke of the wrath of God. The ancient men have taken the position that God won't work miracles as in former days, and times have changed. Peace and safety is the order of the day. These dumb dogs that would not bark are the ones who feel the just vengeance of an offended God. I would not want to be them then, and I appeal to you to plan, strategize, tell your pastors, get ready. Christ, when he had his last night, it was a microcosm of end-time events. When he said, smite the shepherd, the sheep will be scattered. He was smitten, the sheep were scattered. But Daniel 12 verse 7 shows that the holy people will be scattered. Why? Because the shepherds are smitten, okay? And I'm talking about the pastors and leadership of the Seventh-day Adventist Church initially, and maybe other pastors later, okay? When they realize that the people realize that they have been duped by their leaders, and the leaders were not living up to the truth that they should have. God's going to hold them accountable. In times of ignorance, God winks, but we're getting to a time of judgment, time to open our eyes and understand some things that we haven't before. And so please, I beg you, I'm not trying to make money, basically. I've made this as cheap as possible. The soft cover is $7.95 plus shipping on Amazon. You can get it there. But the digital copy, I've just made it $2.99, okay, on Kindle if you want a digital copy. Or you even can get more on my website if you want to, because I include not only this book in digital form, but a video that is worth thousands of dollars if you're taking prescription drugs. It can show how you can reverse most disease without prescription drugs if you go to 3 words everybody wants, healthhappinessdestiny.com, and watch click on the DVD book tab at the top, and you can see a video for 5 minutes that Cleveland Clinic's cardiologist and others on it, reversing disease. And I'm going to send you a link to that DVD. You don't even have to buy the DVD. I'll give you a link to it, the video, for you and anybody on your mailing list who's got diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, etc. You can live better. And it also gives 73% less severity to healthcare workers who got COVID, and that would be better than you-know-what that our church has mandated. Stupid situation for students who are going to attend our schools, like colleges. Well, let the higher education fold as we get to end times. We should be teaching our kids what they need to know, and not everything they get in college, which is many of it superfluous. I don't need organic chemistry or calculus or English literature or those things that I got in school. Bad situation when I've failed to learn some of the better stuff that's needed according to God's Word and prophet. So let's reassess where we're at with this, and thank you for considering it. Oh, one last thing, and I said the church leaders, and I said 7 mistakes. Neil Wilson did not protest the Pope and an ambassador to the Vatican. His son, Ted Wilson, did not protest the Pope in Congress. Christ said, when you see an abomination standing where it ought not, or standing in the holy place, the Pope was standing where he ought not, in the holy place. Okay, that was Mark 13:14 and Matthew 24, verse 15, spoken of by Daniel. Early disciples understood that was Rome. Rome came to Congress, okay, and he represents the abomination in Revelation 17:5, and it's in the holy place because the holy place was where the laws were kept in Jerusalem, and the Pope came to where the law was made, Congress. Can we see the similarity? I hope so. But Ted Wilson said nothing, okay, bad situation, not Protestant. it's over for us as a denomination. But I will say individuals need to speak out and speak the truth and warn people and get out of the cities, because that's what the warning of Christ was about, to flee Jerusalem. Well, Jerusalem is a representation of what the church will be, Ellen White said, if it refuses to walk in the light. And we've refused to walk in the light. Get out of Jerusalem. But the time to do it, I think, will be strategic. Don't leave right now. Mingle, mix, share what you know till this spring, when Loma Linda's on the ground. That will be the time to say, Babylon is fallen. Come out of her, my people. That you receive not of her plagues, that ye partake not of her plagues, and receive not, that you partake not of her sins, and receive not of her plagues. Excuse me. But anyway, hey, we've talked enough. I appreciate your interest. Stay with us. Hey, as Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. I'm saying the same thing today. If you find where I'm wrong, speak up, tell me. My email is on the websites. Go to healthhappinessdestiny.com. Follow the links there. Get something, read it, and let me know if I can help you some way. God bless you. Thank you very much, and see you again in another week.